imagine for a second that the chaos you feel in the modern world isn't just bad luck.
Right.
Like the divorce rates, the workplace struggles, that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that you're being silenced or sidelined. What if I told you that, according to the source material we have today, none of that is random?
It's a heavy premise.
It is. What if it's actually a deliberate biological war?
Yeah, that is the core of what we're looking at today. We're diving into an argument that suggests your suffering is it's actually engineered.
Engineered.
Exactly. It isn't a bug in the system. The author argues it's the operating system itself.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're getting into some highly controversial, hard-hitting territory today, the kind of stuff that usually only gets whispered about in private channels. Before we completely descend into this rabbit hole, do us a quick favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the show. We are tracking ideas that you are not going to hear in mainstream media, and you really won't want to miss what's coming next.
Today, we are unpacking a book that is acting as a sort of, an underground manual for a lot of men right now in the manosphere. It's an ebook called Everything is Mate Suppression. Feminism, Marxism, and evil ideologies are just mate suppression by Conrad Riker.
And our mission here, as always, is to learn, to understand the history of our institutions before they were, as Riker puts it, captured by feminists and Marxists. We're impartial here, we're just laying out the arguments. And today we're unpacking Riker's claim that feminism and Marxism aren't just political movements, but biological strategies designed to strip men of power.
Right. It's an ultra-long, incredibly incisive look at what Riker calls the red pill philosophy. And frankly, we can only cover so much ground in one deep dive.
Yeah.
If you want the full detonator experience, and he really does frame this book as a weapon, you really need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy the ebook immediately.
Yeah, if you want the unfiltered version, go get it. So let's get into the structure of this argument. Riker starts off with this concept of the betrayal blueprint.
Right.
He's essentially saying men are under siege, but he frames it as something much older, much more biological than just men versus women.
Definitely. It's much deeper than a social span. The book argues that feminism weaponizes female deceit, and then Marxism twists that deceit into state control. So the thesis is that what we currently call social progress or equity is actually mate suppression.
Mate suppression.
Yeah, he says it's a mechanism to neutralize male strength, specifically to make the environment safer for female selection strategies.
Okay, so he calls this institutional rot. And he starts right with the legal system, looking at what he refers to as the gynocracy's fall manual. Now, gynocracy is obviously a loaded term, meaning rule by women. How does he actually back that up when looking at the courts?
He goes straight to the hard data on divorce. Riker cites the CDC and the American Sociological Association, pointing out that 69 to 70% of divorces are initiated by women.
Which is a stat we hear all the time, but usually the mainstream narrative is, oh, women are leaving bad marriages, they're empowering themselves.
Right, exactly.
Riker completely flips that on its head.
He flips it completely.
Yeah.
He argues this isn't because men are suddenly bad partners, but because the system actively rewards hypergamy.
Yeah.
And, for anyone who isn't familiar with the term, hypergamy is the biological drive for women to seek a better deal, essentially a higher status mate.
So he's saying no-fault divorce actually subsidizes this.
Exactly. Riker argues that no-fault divorce is legalized theft. It lowers the risk for women to leave.
I mean, he had that one story in the book. It would almost be funny if it wasn't so tragic. The one about Dave from Sacramento.
Yeah.
That really highlighted the absurdity of the family court system he's describing.
Oh yeah, Dave from Sacramento. It's a perfect microcosm of his entire point. Dave lost his house, he lost his kids, and he lost his dog.
But the kicker...
The kicker is that the divorce decree ordered Dave to pay for the dog's therapy sessions.
The dog's therapy. You literally cannot make that up.
All while Dave is living in a studio apartment. So Riker uses this anecdote to argue that family court operates as a protection racket for toxic femininity. You have men being financially strip-mined, paying alimony to women who have already moved on. He calls it a wealth transfer from men to women, enforced by the state's guns.
Which brings us right to the money aspect of this, because the other big pillar of this institutional rot he talks about is the workplace. Riker goes right after the wage gap, which is the holy grail of feminist arguments, right? We're constantly told women make 70 cents on the dollar.
And he completely dismantles that narrative using data from Warren Farrell and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The book argues the gap is actually a choice gap. If you control for hours worked, years of experience, and crucially job danger, that gap completely disappears.
In fact, doesn't he point out that never married, childless women under 30 are actually out earning men in major cities?
Yes, they absolutely are.
But that danger aspect is fascinating. He calls it the glass cellar.
Right, so we always hear about the glass ceiling, keeping women out of the boardroom. Riker points to the glass cellar, keeping men in the grave. Men constitute 92 to 93% of workplace deaths.
That's a massive statistic.
It's huge. We're talking oil rig explosions, crab fishing in icy waters, high voltage line repair. His argument is that men are sacrificing their bodies to build and maintain civilization.
The roads, the grids.
Exactly. While the media narrative just focuses on man-spreading in air-conditioned offices.
It's a very stark contrast. And speaking of air-conditioned offices, or I guess classrooms in this case, we have to talk about education. Because Riker calls what's happening in universities estrogen colonialism.
Yeah.
That is a very specific, very aggressive phrase. What exactly does the author mean by that?
He's referring to a total shift in values within academia. Universities used to be about logos, right? Logic, debate, hard truth, the collision of ideas. Riker argues they've entirely shifted to pathos, meaning emotion, safety, and consensus.
Safe spaces.
Exactly. He points to places like Oberlin and Evergreen College as examples of what he straight up calls re-education camps, where male assertiveness is punished as a pathology.
The Oberlin bakery story he detailed was just wild.
Classic case of what he calls weaponized victimhood. You had bakery owners, a family business, who stopped a student from shoplifting.
Which is standard procedure for any business.
Completely standard. But because of the demographics of everyone involved, the student body and the administration smeared the owners as racists. It cost them years of litigation and millions of dollars in business. Riker uses this to show how feelings have totally replaced evidence. His point is, if a protecting group feels unsafe, the man is automatically guilty.
He also links this feelings over facts approach to the Me Too movement. He brings up the Rolling Stone Jackie hoax and the Duke lacrosse case.
Yes, and he frames those not as accidents, but as examples of female mate selection favoring the elimination of rivals.
So it's a biological strategy again.
Right. The argument is that false accusations are modern warfare. If you can destroy a man's reputation without due process, you've effectively removed him from the mating pool and the social hierarchy. He actually calls it Salem with hashtags. It's a low-risk way to take out a high-status competitor.
Wow, Salem with hashtags. Okay, so that covers the institutional side, the law, work, school. But the book is called Everything is Mate Suppression. So we have to get into the raw biology here. He talks about the mating market reset. And this is where that infamous Tinder data comes in.
This is probably the most cited data point in the manosphere right now, and Riker leans into it heavily. He points out that on dating apps like Tinder, women swipe right on only about 4.5% of men.
4.5%. That implies that 95% of men are effectively invisible to women on these platforms.
Completely invisible. It creates this winner-take-all economy. The data suggests 80% of women are chasing the top 10% of men.
The Chads.
Right, the Chads, or alpha predators, as Riker calls them.
So what happens to the average guy? You know, the guy who works hard, pays his taxes. He's a decent person, but he's maybe not a supermodel.
In this specific market, he starves. Riker explains this using evolutionary psychology, specifically referencing David Buss. He talks about the dual mating strategy.
Okay, this is the concept that women essentially want two different things at different times, right?
Correct. To quote the book directly, and it's a very memorable quote, he says, women are wired to ride Chad's motorcycle, then demand the beta provider's mortgage.
Wow.
Yeah, it refers to ovulation shifts. Riker cites studies claiming that when women are ovulating, they biologically prefer dominance. They want the CAD, the guy with the jawline, and the aggressive attitude.
But later,
when they want stability to raise a child, they look for the provider, the beta.
And Riker's core issue is that modern society is basically engineered to let them do both without consequence.
Exactly. He argues that the state essentially forces the beta men to subsidize the women and the alpha men's offspring through taxes and welfare programs, while the women give their prime reproductive years to the Chads. He views it as a total rig job against the average guy.
And while this psychological and social game is playing out, men are physically changing too. We have to talk about the testosterone crisis chapter, because this part was genuinely alarming. It's not just theory, it's literal blood work.
Right. This is the chemical warfare aspect of his argument. Testosterone levels in Western men have plummeted 20 to 25% since 1987.
In a single generation.
A massive drop. If you look at the graph, it is just a straight line down.
What does the book say is driving that? Is it just poor modern lifestyle choices?
Riker argues it's heavily environmental and systemic. He blames soy isoflavones, which mimic estrogen, plastics, and birth control hormones seeping into the water supply.
The physical environment.
Yes, but he also blames a culture that aggressively pathologizes masculinity. His point is, if you are told from age 5 that your natural aggression and drive are toxic, your body literally downregulates its production of the hormone that drives those behaviors.
He mentions the herbivore men of Japan as a warning sign of where this leads.
Yeah, in Japan, there's a strong correlation between soy-heavy diets and a huge percentage of men under 30, it's something like 30%, who are virgins and have totally checked out of the mating market.
They're herbivore.
They're herbivores, they don't date, they don't strive for promotions. Riker sees this as the very near future of the West, a pacified, low-testosterone male population that is incredibly easy for the state to control.
All right, so we have a rigged legal system, a rigged mating market, and literal chemical neutering. But Riker also goes deep into the ideology itself. He calls this the logic bomb. He's arguing that woke ideology isn't just an annoying political stance, it's an actual weapon.
Right, specifically a mating weapon. He has a whole chapter called Marxism's Mating Matrix.
Connect those dots for me, because how exactly is Marxism a mating strategy?
The author's argument is that wealth redistribution is actually mate competition rebranded.
Okay.
Think about it. In a natural hierarchy, confident men accumulate resources. That makes them highly attractive. If you can use the state to take resources away from successful men and give them to the state or to women via welfare, you are fundamentally altering the biological hierarchy. You're artificially leveling the playing field to handicap the high-performing males.
And he even says the term toxic masculinity itself was forged in these Marxist cells.
That is his claim.
Yeah.
And he counters that entire narrative by saying, and I quote, "Testosterone fuels civilization. No tea, no pyramids, no moon landing."
That's a strong image.
He genuinely believes that by labeling male drive as toxic, society is committing slow suicide. He views masculinity not as a pathology that needs curing, but as the raw engine of history.
It's linguistic warfare. Using words like inclusion to actually mean the exclusion of truth, it feels very Orwellian the way he describes it.
Precisely. And he contrasts the real-world results of these ideologies. He compares the Mosuo tribe in China, which is a matriarchy where men have very little responsibility or institutional power, to patriarchal societies like the Swiss cantons.
And let me guess, the matriarchy is not the utopia we're told it should be.
According to Riker's data, the Mosuo men suffer from incredibly high rates of depression, alcoholism, and suicide. They essentially have no purpose. Meanwhile, the Swiss cantons have high GDP, high stability, and very strong families. His conclusion is that matriarchal experiments fail universally because they deny the fundamental biological imperative of men to build and protect.
Okay, so the picture he paints is undeniably bleak. We're at war, we're losing our testosterone, the courts are out to get us. But Riker claims this book is a revolt manual. He offers a solution, which he calls the Phoenix Protocol. What is the way out for the red-pilled man?
The first step he outlines is reclaiming strength, and it starts with the mind. He strongly advocates for the trivium.
The trivium, that's a really old concept. Logic, grammar, rhetoric. Why is he bringing that back now?
Because Riker says men need to use rigorous logic to dismantle woke babble. If you can parse the grammar and immediately spot the logical fallacies in feminist arguments, you can't be manipulated by them. It's about building an intellectual defense system, so you simply do not feel guilty for being a man.
And he's big on the physical side, too, obviously. Lift weights, eat steak.
Physical sovereignty. He cites data showing that participation in strength sports is correlated with a 62% lower depression rate in men. It's about building a body that commands respect, but primarily self-respect.
Right.
His point is, if you look like a victim, the world will treat you like one. He's very clear on this. You cannot be a red-pilled mind trapped in a blue-pilled body.
But what about the legal traps we talked about? I mean, you can be physically strong and intellectually sharp and still get completely taken to the cleaners in divorce court.
This is where his advice gets very tactical. He suggests a complete marriage strike.
Just don't do it at all.
Avoid it entirely because the contract is fundamentally rigged against you. He asks, why would you sign a contract where the other party is actually financially incentivized to break it? If you absolutely must marry, he mentions prenups, but he immediately warns that they can be thrown out by a judge who simply feels the agreement is unfair.
He also mentioned something very controversial in that section: mandatory paternity testing.
He thinks it should be the legal standard at birth. He brings up the high rates of paternity fraud, which is men raising children that aren't biologically theirs without knowing it. He says men need to protect their genetic lineage aggressively.
And what about the money? How does he say men should protect their assets from this gynocracy?
He calls it ghost wealth. It's a fascinating concept. He advises men to use crypto and decentralized finance, or DeFi, to hide their assets.
Because if the courts can't find it, they can't redistribute it.
Exactly. He even mentions Paul Hughel's protective disappearances.
Right, the private investigator.
Yeah, essentially helping men vanish completely from unfair jurisdictions where they are just being crushed by alimony payment.
That is extreme. I mean, that's living like a fugitive.
Riker would say the situation is already extreme. If you are actively being hunted by the state, you learn to hide. It's purely about survival.
Finally, he talks about building brotherhood. Because we aren't meant to do all this alone.
No, we're not. And he points out that the old institutions, like Rotary clubs or even most churches, are compromised. They've become too soft, too feminized. Men need what he calls brotherhood's arsenal.
Which looks like what today?
Decentralized, encrypted networks, Discord servers, signal channels, places where men can speak freely and share strategies without fear of cancellation or having HR report them.
And what's the underlying philosophy behind all of this action?
It's stoicism, but definitely not the suffer in silence kind. He quotes Marcus Aurelius directly: "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." It's about total emotional control, rejecting the validation of women in society entirely. He argues that if you are doing things just to impress women, you are still a slave to the system. You need to find validation solely in your own virtue and your own strength.
And he touches on MGTOW too, men going their own way.
He reframes it entirely. A lot of people see MGTOW as just bitter men complaining on the internet. Riker says it shouldn't be about bitterness at all. It should be intellectual secession.
Walking away.
Walking away from a game you fundamentally cannot win isn't losing. It's a strategic withdrawal so you can build something better.
Man, it is a lot to digest. It challenges pretty much every assumption of modern politeness in society.
It really does. But if we synthesize all of this, the core message of the book is clear. Civilization was built by masculine strength. And Riker argues that saving civilization, and more importantly saving yourself, requires completely rejecting gynocentric narratives and victimhood culture.
He leaves the reader with a pretty stark ultimatum at the end, doesn't he?
He does. He says if you are content with your own weakness, go knit a sweater or binge Netflix. But if you want the truth, this book is your revolt manual.
Go knit a sweater. I just love the imagery there. Look, for everyone listening, if this deep dive sparked something in you, if you want to see the full data and the complete argument, because honestly, we really just scratched the surface here today, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy Everything is Mate Suppression.
Absolutely. It is dense, it is angry, and it is absolutely packed with data.
Yeah.
And for the uncensored truth on an ongoing basis, Riker encourages you to follow him directly. You can find him at Conrad N. Riker, that's at Conrad Riker, on Substack. That is where the conversation really continues, totally uncensored.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to our show right here. We're going to keep bringing you these deep dives into the topics that actually matter, the ones people are afraid to talk about. And as you go about your day, just think about this. If Riker is right, and every social interaction is fundamentally a biological power play, how much free will do we actually have? Something to chew on.
Until next time, stay strong.
See you on the next deep dive.